In today's episode, we look at an organised criminal group just outside London who imported high-grade product from Amsterdam, hidden in boxes of flowers. The method they used and the crew would form the basis for the plot on the BBC drama The Shadow Line. The gang was run by a group of investors called the Untouchable Ones. None of the crew knew who they were working for. The highly organised crew were nicknamed the Tesco of product, making so much money, just over £68 million, but it's thought to be double that. Money would be left everywhere. They left £225,000 in cash rotting in a damp safe in a lockup, unable to spend it or launder it fast enough. The money would be mixed with legit to be laundered through money exchanges. A 14-month undercover operation by police would crack the criminal gang, run at different tiers. We look at the crew, the police investigation, and the sentences, plus the one man no one knew about. We go back to 2005 to London. Terence Bowler headed with a group of investors what would become one of the biggest UK smuggling operations ever in the United Kingdom. After establishing contacts in Amsterdam, a group of investors, the board, all with equal clout, came up with a plan to start a business, a legitimate flower company. Like most enterprises, they started off small. The product was hidden in boxes of flowers. But with the success of the smaller deliveries, the crew started upping the product to £750,000 a week. They were shifting it within days. The product was brought in boxes of flowers. Inside the boxes from Holland, labelled American Leaf, it travelled to the UK from the Netherlands, hidden in these crates. It was imported into the UK through the Harwich Ferry Port in Essex and delivered to Hull. They were then driven to rented lock-up garages in outer London. With the money coming in thick and fast, the problem was laundering it. After the bosses had spent money on nice houses, bought without mortgages, millions in high-end cars, holidays and private schools for the kids, when they couldn't spend any more money on themselves, they travelled to Geneva and bought luxury watches and then landed in a prime location in Lanzarote, which began the construction of 12 luxury villas. To do this, they needed to launder vast amounts of money quick. This is where a crooked employee at the World Currency Exchange in Liverpool Street Railway Station in London came in. The crooked employee would put the money through without recording it. This was wired to accounts in Dubai and Pakistan. No figure is known, but £11 million was calculated as a conservative figure, through this one employee alone. The three investors, now named directors, had nothing to do with the product or vast amounts of money. They were given monthly laundered sums of money. On paper, they looked like they were straight businessmen. The gang referred to the three directors as the Untouchable Ones. They were not known to the crew, and that's the way the directors wanted it. Anything going down stays with the lower tiers. The three Untouchable Ones were the directors. They were Terence Bowler, Peter Moran and Mark Kinnemont. There'd be regular board meetings about shipments, times, money, the imports and future strategies of investing the money and bringing in reliable new recruits. A plan was made that the product and the money were never to be together, which would limit any losses or end police involvement there and then with just a bust. The next tier was Liam Salter, David Couchman, Timothy Sullivan, which were the organisation. They had nothing to do with the Untouchable Ones. Only contact was with Terence Bowler. This would be limited and extremely rare. The next tier was the dealer suppliers. These shifted the product. Roger Alexander, Peter Brown and Barry Byrne. This tier had no knowledge of the three Untouchable Ones. This tier had a team of dealers who sold product on. The final tier were two drivers, James Hay and Andrew West. In August 2007, a cashier at another exchange, who was one of the money launderers, was flagged. The amount of money going through the exchanges was starting to get noticed. His cashier name was on the entry transactions, which would then be deleted. At the time, extra computer security was installed in case of hacking or a hardware crash. The exchange was unaware that there was these money laundering transactions going through. Though the transactions were wiped and the process covered up, it left a phantom carbon copy. The exchange contacted the police, which was the procedure. These transactions were watched, and instead of a cashier being arrested straight out, it would be more valuable to keep him where he was. His arrest would alert the people he's working for. The cashier's every move was being watched. There was vast sums going through, but the accounts were hidden, which was not picked up by that security software, due to laws of data protection. Police still did not know where the money was coming from. This would be the start of a 14-month undercover police surveillance. Around this time, a shipment was intercepted by customs. The untouchable ones then changed the smuggling route. The amount seized was £750,000, but this gave police the name of the flour company. Now, if you watched my videos before, I've explained in detail what happens when a shipment is confiscated. So I'll make it simple. Say you own a flower shop. You imported flowers, but they also had an illegal import in them. Customs finds the item. The whole import is then withheld. You'll be given a confiscation order. The illegal item may have had nothing to do with you. The confiscation order is to protect your flower company from loss. Because what you ordered is now in the hands of customs, it'll be there for a while. With this confiscation notice, you can claim from the insurance for lost shipment. Because by the time you get them flowers for your shop, they'll be well past their sell-by date. The flower shop address will be passed on to police, but in most cases the companies involved rarely have anything to do with it. Most times the collection of the illegal items is when it's moved from transport trucks and then removed somewhere down the line before it gets to the flower shop, with the shop never knowing anything has happened. The £750,000 shipment seized by customs then sent a confiscation notice to the shop. The details were also forwarded to the police. What caused police suspicions was the deliveries were moved to another port. If they kept the same deliveries to the same port for several months, minus the product of course, the police's cursory checks would not have alerted them to the shop. Police now have a major lead and a money launderer, but have not connected the parties together yet. Police dug through records of the flower shop and traced back to it in 2 years, 88 shipments. With smuggled product calculated to 250 kilograms, that's the same weight of a vending machine, or an African lion, or a grand piano, making the money made in those 88 shipments £20 million. Police had hit the mother lode. Now it was finding the players involved and the evidence to nail them with. The gang switched and used lorries to drive the product. Police then started surveillance and then wiretaps. Dutch and Swiss police were also helped tracking deliveries and wiretapping suspects. Several months later, police surveillance had established the tiers of the gang. With videos, wiretaps, and now connecting the money launderers to the smuggling operation. 14 months later, after customs seized the shipment and police started the operation, in a series of dawn raids, 12 of the gang were arrested, including the untouchable ones. Well, what started the police on the trail of the gang? It wasn't customs finding the shipment in 2008. We go back to a year before, 2007. The UK Police's Specialist Intelligence Section received a tip-off about a gang a year before, though it was extremely vague. While the Specialist Intelligence Section was building a list of who was involved, they had the untouchable ones in their sights, all 3 of them. They were the tip-off. What was not known is how they'd get their product across or its destination. Because of the tier system, they never had workers, just the ones in charge. The workers never talked to the upper tier, making any connection extremely difficult, but not impossible. It would all change in 2008 when the shipment was caught. Dutch police had found the supplier, which would catch tier 2 part of the gang in phone conversations with Terence Bowler, also communicating to the untouchable ones, which gave an idea where the shipment was departing from. The shipment of flowers and product was intercepted by customs, and it was very well hidden. A £750,000 shipment of product in heat-sealed packs containing a flower scent to hide the smell. After the gang's arrest, 2 of the drivers were missing, and they were picked up in Calais with €500,000 in a compartment behind the dashboard of a Ford Mondeo. After the final arrest in November 2008, police went through the properties and lockups. Detectives raided addresses in Epsom, Kingston, Worcester Park and Ashstead, all in Surrey. One safe in a lockup contained £225,000, while they also found £60,000 rotten in plastic bags. A money counter was also found, and it wasn't reset, showing £2 million having gone through in £20 notes. Police compared the powerful gang to the Daniel Craig film Layer Cake. The board of directors, the untouchable ones, were Terence Bowler, 40 years old. He admitted conspiracy to supply and launder proceeds of crime. Mark Kinnemott, 40 years old, posed as a property developer with a string of companies. He admitted conspiracy to supply and launder proceeds of crime. Peter Moran, 37 years old, pleaded guilty conspiracy to supply and launder proceeds of crime. There was a missing member of the group, Anthony Mills, 43 years old. He was an unknown fourth director of the Untouchable Ones, but police believe he was top tier, above the Untouchable Ones. That was the king. Mills was also oversaw a huge money laundering operation, setting up companies in international tax havens, Switzerland, Panama, and the British Virgin Islands to hide the profits. He also had interests in his UK property through his security firm, A&M Services, which claimed to specialise in surveillance and phone tapping. Police only realised his existence through paperwork recovered from the raids. He never appeared on surveillance reports because he was always overseas. At the time of the arrests, he was in hiding. He had become the United Kingdom's most wanted fugitive. At Suffolk Crown Court in March 2010, the court heard how the organisation have been untouchable in the past. They kept a low profile in the UK and to all intents and purposes appeared to be legitimate businessmen. Neighbours would never have suspected Terence Bowler was a big-time dealer. In fact, he remained very low-key. He never spent lavishly. Neighbours thought he was a builder. The Untouchable Ones never came into contact with the product themselves. That was left to others. It was a layered business, and Terence Bowler was at the top. The business was broken down into tiers with the money launderers and the people who keep the organisation operational. The drivers, the dealers in tiers 2 and 3. Evidence was presented in court of phone conversations, surveillance and tracing the proceeds of crime. Prosecutor Timothy Cray said, if the man pushing the product on the street, the small-time dealer, is the equivalent to the market trader selling his fruit and veg outside London Bridge Station, then this group were the big players. They were the Tesco. If you bought the product in South London, it's not 50%, not 90%, closer to 99%, to 100% it came from this organisation. They had taken over the market. Hundreds of thousands were hidden in cars and driven abroad, while other dirty money was laundered by mixing it with legitimate cash at a foreign exchange bureau and wide abroad. The court also heard how consignments of the product were imported initially into the UK through Harwich Ferryport in Essex, and then later through Hull, where they were driven to residential lockups in outer London. A Proceeds of Crime Act was filed with the Untouchable Ones having to pay £6 million back. Payment must be made in 6 months or extra years will be added to their sentences. Proceeds of Crime would further look to seize the Lanzarote development, houses and cars. The Flower Gang, the name given by police, but press soon picked up on it, and the gang was called this, received their sentencing. Terence Bowler, 40 years old, admitted conspiracy to supply and launder proceeds of crime. He was sentenced to 16 years. Mark Kinnemott, 40 years old, admitted conspiracy to supply and launder proceeds of crime. He was sentenced to 14 years. Peter Moran, 37 years old, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to supply and launder proceeds of crime. He was sentenced to 14 years. Liam Salter, 39 years old, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to supply and launder proceeds of crime. He was sentenced to 7 years. David Couchman, 38 years old, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to supply and launder proceeds of crime. He was sentenced to 6.5 years. Timothy Sullivan, 38 years old, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to supply and launder proceeds of crime. He was sentenced to 7 years. Asim Bashir, 35 years old, who worked in the money exchange, was convicted of money laundering, was jailed for 6 years. James A., 31 years old, the driver, got 3.5 years for possession with intent to supply. Roger Alexander, 44 years old, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to supply and was sentenced to 8 years. Peter Brown, 37 years old, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to supply. He received 3.5 years. Barry Byrne, 59 years old, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to supply. He received 4.5 years. Andrew West, one of the drivers, 36 years old, received 18 months for money laundering. A gang run on tears that would end in tears. Sorry, I couldn't resist it. But okay, they got caught in the end. The first was the cashier, who knew the system so well he would cover every part of his tracks, but still not enough. The new software installed to stop the hackers caught him, but it didn't lead them to the group. The main thing that sent the organisation on a downward spiral was the phone call to police intelligence. Yes, it was vague, maybe to protect the caller's identification. The caller named 3 of the 4 untouchable ones, but why not the 4th? He was barely mentioned in phone taps and messages. He was a more silent partner, thought to be the leader, but was still way up to it in his neck, laundering the money through legit companies. The caller gave no info on the shipment or the lower tiers, just 3 of the untouchable ones. So who sold them out? Now, as soon as I read the documents, now I'm not saying this is the case, but years ago someone I knew, a similar thing had happened. So let me give you an opinion. Not fact, my opinion. I think one of the untouchable ones had wronged a lover or a close friend, or even family, enough for them to pull the plug on them completely. To me, it explains how only 3 were named and not the 4th man. Anthony Mills was never around. He was getting his hands dirty laundering money. He didn't care or had time for board meetings. The thing about the board meetings, it's easier to sit and talk about work than actually doing it. He was never around, so he was barely spoken of. Tens of millions of the gang's money is still out there in Pakistan, Dubai and Switzerland. Only the gang themselves will know the full extent of the money out there. Anthony Mills will be arrested a year later in Amsterdam. He was sent back to the UK and was sentenced to 17.5 years at Southwark Crown Court. A proceeds of crime was also filed. The gang had been given by the judge 6 months to pay £6 million. 2 years later, hardly any of it was paid back, with the judge looking to add more time to their sentences, facing an extra 10 years in prison without any chance of early release. In 2021, Terence Bowler was on early release. He had served 10 years behind bars, and now 51 years old, narrowly avoided being sent back to prison for withholding his criminal past on insurance forms. The court heard between 2018 and 2020 he used his son's bank account for one insurance transaction, did not tell the insurers about his previous convictions, lied about ownership of a vehicle, and concealed the state of his vehicle history. One question bugs me. Police reckon the gang had millions hidden and squirreled away. So why would you commit insurance fraud? Wouldn't you just pay the extra? This case fascinated me, and I'm sure it's one we won't hear the last of. It's a case that should be a film. The story became one of the plots to the BBC series The Shadow Line, and it was a big inspiration. To explain the operation, police also had to use the film Layer Cake. So we'll use this to end the video, a quote from the late great Michael Gambon. Opera tonight, the damnation of Faust. Man sells his soul to the devil. It all ends in tears. These arrangements usually do.